Hi everybody, my name is Lisa A. Romano. I am a life coach for adult children of alcoholics and basically for anyone who struggles to feel loved in this world and who struggles with any, issues with self-esteem or feels like they don't have self-esteem. That's basically my forte. This is where I help my clients gain self-esteem and gain the tools that they need to figure out who they are in this world. And first, what I want to do is I want to talk to people about why it is so many of us suffer from low senses of self or low self-esteem. Love is something, dear ones, that has to be taught. Now, many of us have never heard that before, but love is not a given. Even though when we came into this time-space reality, we were love. Like we are love. We are spiritual beings. We are more spiritual than we are physical. That's our truth. But love of self is something that needs to be taught. Mom and dad, our families of origin, our religions, our society, our communities of people, were supposed to teach us how to love the self. So what happens to those of us who are born to people who don't show us love, that don't show us authentic love? What happens to us to those of us who are born to mentally ill parents, who are born to mentally disturbed parents, who are born to BPDs, who are born to narcissists, who are born to alcoholics, who are born to the emotionally abusive? What happens to those of us who are born to perfectionistic moms and workaholic dads, who, we live in homes with white picket fences and everything looks great, but no one is teaching us how to love ourselves, how to love us. Children need to be told, you are good. Children need to be told, you are beautiful, you are wonderful, you are such a kind person. The world is a better place because you're in it. Children need to be told those things. Otherwise, they don't know it. Children don't naturally know that they're good. They need to actually be told that they're good. So what happens when we're born to people who just never give us that type of feedback? The problem is that we learn to believe that we're the opposite of that. We learn to think that, well, in the absence of what they're saying, that's where I exist. So in other words, it matters what people say, but it also matters what people don't say. So if your mom didn't tell you I love you, if your dad didn't tell you I love you, if you weren't embraced, if you weren't touched appropriately, I mean, have your hand held, have your hair stroked, have your face touched, been given a hug when you woke up in the morning. If you didn't receive that type of positive tactile stimulation, in addition to never hearing the words, I love you, then you don't know that you're loved, you don't know that you're good, and without being objectified, in my opinion, a child that isn't touched appropriately has a very difficult time feeling real. It's sort of like thinking, you're looking at a car, right? You're thinking about a car, and it's up here, and you're thinking about the car. But then you walk outside, you go into your driveway, and you touch a car. Now the car is real. Children need to feel real. So tactile stimulation is really, really important. Obviously, we're talking about appropriate tactile stimulation. We're not talking about inappropriate tactile stimulation. We're talking about parents that know that their job and their agenda is to make this little innocent angelic being, you, feel valid, feel real. So when we are born to people who are dysfunctional for so many reasons, and let's just say that they are energetically blocked. Let's say they had difficult childhoods themselves. We can have empathy for them, but not until we have empathy for self. A lot of the self-help gurus out there, of past especially, have inundated us with the idea that the key to happiness is forgiveness. I don't think so. Unless, of course, we have learned to forgive ourselves first. I can't give you something I don't have. So if you've wounded me or my parents have wounded me, and I, as a result, have done a lot of messed up, crazy-ass things in my life because I didn't know that I was good, then until I learn to forgive that in myself, until I learn to forgive, until the higher aspect of me learns to forgive the lower aspects of me, I can't offer anyone forgiveness. And so I really think that that's a missing link. So many of us have been taught that, oh, you want to feel better? Just forgive, just forgive, just forgive, just forgive. And I really think that what that does to us sometimes is that makes us feel even more guilty because it doesn't feel real to forgive someone. Why? Because we haven't yet imparted that upon ourselves. So one of the ways that we learn to love ourselves is we learn to acknowledge what went wrong. We came into this life experience loved and connected, but there was a discord that was created, and the discord is not our fault. The discord happened between mother and father. They are discordant. They are out of alignment with self, and so they're out of alignment. They cannot align with us. They cannot give us something that they don't have. So if they're not loving self, then they cannot impart that type of love to us. They just can't because of an array of reasons. Like I said earlier, they could be alcoholics. They could be drug addicts. Mom could be perfectionistic. Mom could be bulimic. Mom could be anorexic. Mom could be having an affair. Mom could be addicted to anxiety medicine. Mom might just be a beast. Mom might be angry. She might be totalitarian. She might be obsessed with cleaning. She might be a prostitute. She might be a crack addict. Dad might be a workaholic. Dad might be not the sharpest tool in the shed. Dad might be autistic. Dad might be, out having affairs himself. Dad might be an alcoholic. Dad might be a compulsive gambler. Dad might be a high roller big shot, and, he likes hanging out with his friends more than he does spending time at home with his children. So so many of us think that abused children come from these terrible-looking homes, but not always. Lots of people came from what looked like really wonderful homes, but inside the home was not in alignment with spirit, not in alignment with truth. There was a whole lot of denial going on. And so our job here on this earth plane is to eventually get to a point where we are all love, we are light, and we eventually see things through the I am reality. Now, that is like a Christ consciousness, and that is really the path that ACOAs and codependents and love addicts, I mean, this is my niche, these are my clients primarily, but any wounded adult child from any dysfunctional home, the path to healing will lead you to a Christ consciousness. And what do I mean by that is when you get to the point where you have learned to love yourself, and I mean really love yourself, you will learn that you are everything and everything is you. When you get to a Christ consciousness, you die to the old. That's the sacrifice. You die to the old, and you become born again in the new. New what? The new reality, the new idea of self. You get to recreate your idea of self. And so you end up saving yourself and becoming born again. My road to recovery I had to die to the old. I had to die to the old limited victim mentality that kept me stuck and recreating my past. When I was being raised, I was raised by two unrecovered adult children of alcoholics who were very disconnected within self, and their relationship was, my parents' relationship was and is very codependent. So there was no authentic connecting. My parents are they're good people. They're not horrible people, but they're fear-based and they're denial-based and they're not awake. And so when I speak to them, I have to be very conscious of the fact that I am not talking to people who are awake. And in the beginning of my journey, I was below that veil. I was below that veil, below that understanding, looking up at mom and dad like they were mom and dad. I wasn't, and what that was doing was I was still their child. I was still seeking their validation. I was still trying to please them. I was still trying to appease them. And so that kept me stuck in a victim-type mentality. As I got older and began this true healing journey, I had to come face to face with the reality that they were codependent, they were denial-based, and that was never going to change. And as much as that sucked, and as much as that meant that I was probably never going to have that authentic connection between a child and its parent, I had to accept that. And because if I didn't, I was going to stay below the veil. And so that was difficult. And coming to terms with the fact that, yes, they were my parents, but I had to rise above my mental idea of them, and I had to begin seeing them as people, as individuals, as people other than my parents. That was life changing for me. When I began to look at my mom as a woman, when I began to look at my dad as a man, when I began to see myself as a woman that was looking at a man and another woman, then the whole parent-child thing began to shift. And I was no longer seeking the validation. I slowly began creeping above the veil of consciousness and living in a higher realm of reality. And as I began to climb, there were so many levels that I had to hurdle through. There was anger, there was resentment, there was abandonment, I was just so angry at one point, thinking that how could my parents have put me down and thought that that was okay? How could my mother have pit me against my brother and my sister and even my dad and even neighbors? How could she have done that and thought that that was okay? She got away with that. And so there were definitely times in my life where I wanted I struggled with that. I didn't want to struggle with that, but I was struggling with that. The road to recovery has to incorporate that type of accepting of pain. Understanding that there are gaps within us that were created in our childhood that were not our faults. And learning to honor that within ourselves. And learning to say, this happened to me, this is my reality, and I'm going to spend some time being a little pissed off. Because I wasn't allowed to be angry when I was 3. I wasn't allowed to be angry when I was 7. I wasn't allowed to be angry when I was 12. The only people that were allowed to be angry were the big people in my house. And that just never made sense to me. Why were you allowed to have a feeling and express it and I wasn't? But when you come from a denial-based home, what happens is you get shamed for telling the truth. So it doesn't make sense. So when you're 7 and you're saying, Mommy, how come you can get angry but I can't? And you get smacked in the mouth for that, what does that teach you? That teaches you to be afraid to tell the truth. That teaches you that your feelings don't matter and you're not worthy. So here we go to this lack of self-esteem. How can a child that comes from a home that is non-nurturing, that is cold, that is disconnected, that is denial-based, how can that child that comes from that home who is also on top of it not told that he or she is good, not encouraged to follow their heart, how the heck does that person grow up and become self-loving? Until that person wakes up, it's not that person's fault that they're not self-loving. It makes complete sense to not be loving of self if that is your experience. So on the road to recovery, we must understand that, especially if you're codependent, that the way to break codependency patterns is to learn to love yourself. And so how do we do that? Setting boundaries is crucial. Begin taking notes of how you feel when you're around certain people. If you feel like you are being bombarded by other people's negative energies, dear ones, that's something that you really need to pay attention to. So for the purpose of this video today and this hangout, what I'm going to ask you to do is begin keeping a log of how you feel around certain people. Begin to understand and make note of those people that pull you down energetically and don't encourage you. And then from that point, begin limiting your time with those people. Now, on the other end of that, what we have to do is we have to start paying attention to what makes us feel better. Do walks outside make you feel better? If that's the case, begin taking more walks outside. Does hanging out with animals make you feel better? Then hang out with animals. Does talking on the phone with Aunt Mary from Florida make you feel better, then talk to Aunt Mary more frequently. The goal is to begin to help you learn to honor how you feel and allowing yourself to figure out your own guidance system. And so the road to loving self is definitely found within. What makes you feel good? What makes you feel worse? And honoring that. That system of honoring how we feel is corrupt because no one honored how we felt when we were younger. And so, you know, this has been a very quick hangout, only about 15 minutes. But I'm really, really hoping that in this time, I've helped you figure out a way that you can learn to honor yourself, dear one. That is the goal. The goal in life is to learn to love yourself and to begin to understand that your guidance must be what is leading you, your internal guidance, checking in with internal guidance. Does this feel right? Does that feel bad? Noting it, paying attention to it, and learning how to trust that guidance. And if you continue to follow your bliss moment to moment, then eventually you will come to a place where you are harmonious with others. You are peaceful. You are accepting. You don't judge anybody anymore. You don't judge yourself anymore. And back to that forgiveness thing. Once you have learned to trust your guidance and you move closer and closer towards peace and love of self, that means you have also successfully learned to forgive self, forgive the lower aspects of self, because the lower aspect of self is just a reflection of what mother and father have done to you. Period. That's it. Once you learn to say, oh my God, that was never me. That was, you know, my programming and all my patterns, that was done to me. That was done to me. And once you develop great empathy for that child that was abused and then set off in life reacting to that abuse, and you forgive self, then you will learn, dear one, how to forgive others. So I'm hoping that this hangout, thank you very much for anyone who tuned in live. I really, really appreciate it and look forward to this video being uploaded on YouTube. Hopefully next week I'll do another hangout live and we'll get some more viewers and also have more question and answers also live. That would be awesome. So thank you to anyone who tuned in live. I really appreciate it. Namaste.